Hi, this is Lori. I'm doing my video observation journal number 2 for Education 676. The prompt is to reflect on evidence-based practices discussed at our IRIS module, which ones I'm familiar with, which ones are new, discuss any I'd be interested in learning more about and why, and discuss your thoughts regarding cases of autism and what resonated. So let's start with EBPs. I'm actually familiar with quite a few, in part because I've been teaching for a long time, and in part because I have a daughter with autism. So it's been part of my life for a lot of years now. Antecedent-based interventions are, I've used frequently looking at what are the precursors to the behavior and what can I do to prevent the behavior by improving on the antecedent support. In my classroom, probably one of the biggest supports we use for this for assignments is chunking, and also a visual schedule so that students with autism find that it's in a small part and there's breaks broken in, so the task really feels much more manageable for them and they don't get overwhelmed, and then the avoidance behavior decreases. Let's see. I have used extinction. It's hard to use extinction in a classroom setting because sometimes some of the behavior that you're ignoring can be it then escalates because you get an extinction burst, and sometimes you can't ignore behavior if it becomes violent or unsafe. So that's not always the first one I go to, but I do know how to use it. Creating and doing a functional behavior assessment is something I often do, knowing what the purpose of the behavior is so that then you can teach an equivalent behavior to meet the same need is a practice I use with several of my students and have used with my daughter as well. Functional communication training is something that I have not had to use as much with, and it is an area I'd like to learn more about. I have a student right now who is using Proloquo, but actually not because she's autistic. She's using Proloquo because she refuses to speak. She is capable, but I'm just kind of reaching for any support I can get so that I can communicate with her in a way that she will use. And since she is very motivated by technology, I'm hoping that Proloquo will be a good way for her to willingly communicate with me. It's very hard to assess a student when they are nonverbal as a behavior, not as because they are nonverbal. I have used modeling quite a bit, as well as video modeling. I have done parent intervention, obviously, because I'm a parent of a child with autism, so I have done parent implemented interventions. I find that that's especially helpful because you really need, especially when kids are younger, you really need to be able to take that behavior work you're working on and not just do it in the school setting or in the therapy setting, but really work on it in multiple settings throughout their day. And the person most able to do that often is the parent. I use prompting, I use reinforcement, I use redirection and response intervention. I do social skills training. My daughter's actually in a social skills training group. And in my classroom, I use social narratives quite a bit. It's a good way to teach kids kind of like what is the expected behavior and put it in a story form so they can understand it. I use the words expected and unexpected behavior several times a day, daily. It's kind of like my mantra, was that expected, was that unexpected, what would be the expected behavior? I often use time delay in my instruction to fade prompting. And the biggest one for me is visual supports. I have visual supports everywhere. We have visual supports in my classroom. We have visual supports of our schedule. We have visual supports of what does lining up look like and what does it not look like, and what does it look like to hang up your backpack, and what does it look like to walk in a line, and where do we find things in the environment, and what's our schedule, and where do you find your cubby, and where are the boundaries of where you should be for this activity at this time. It's just everything is visually supported in my classroom. So now I'm going to speak to part 2 of this question, which, as a parent of a child with autism, Faces of Autism really resonated with me. It's always like eye-opening and emotional and sometimes difficult to hear stories of other kids with autism, because in my case, my daughter had some medical issues early on. She had seizure disorder. She had speech and language delay. She was unintelligible until probably, well, she still isn't fully intelligible, but she was very unintelligible until she was 5 or 6. She didn't present even to me as a special ed teacher. Like, we didn't present, nobody said autism. Everybody said she's delayed in her development. She's what would have traditionally, prior to the change, been PDD NOS. But now, all of a sudden, we changed her definition, and she's ASD. And it was a fight for me to get the school district to recognize that. And yet, as I'm looking at all these videos, I go, yep, that's her. Yep, that's her. When I watch the mom for Faces of Autism talk about how difficult it is to find a social group that her child could play with typically developing peers in a structured way, I just yelled, preach. Like, seriously, it's so hard. And even in, like, I have my daughter in a social skills group, and they won't let them have any contact outside of the social skills group to maintain the therapeutic environment. And I'm like, life is not a therapeutic environment. Sometimes we have to learn from life. Taking it out of the bubble is so hard. And I get it. Like, I get when these parents say, you know, I have concerns and I'm worried, and what will happen if they get bigger than me, and they can't communicate and they get violent, and there's so many pieces to being a parent of a disabled child. And I love that Iris Center put this model together, because I think you just don't know. I think you don't know till you do it. And, you know, it's hard. It's heartbreaking, and it's hard. You know, it's hard when your kids, you know, they have restrictive areas of interest and they can't communicate well with their peers, or they, like, there's just so many pieces to communication and repetitive interest, and just not understanding social cues and how to break into a conversation, and all these things that for me are like just natural, and for so many teachers probably are just natural, and for kids with ASD it's not natural. It's a learned skill that's in the process of learning frustrating, and sometimes, you know, you have issues with attention and depression, and you have all these comorbid conditions that, you know, some of these parents talked about in their videos, and it's true. You're not just dealing with one thing, and it's such a spectrum that no one kid is the same. And so it always resonates with me to listen to other parents talk about their kids with autism. Because there's a huge range of support and need and evidence-based practice, and over and all and through it, I think educators need to realize that the child's best, first, and most long-term teacher is the parent. They're the person who's going to worry about this kid, not just the year they're in 4th grade, but when they're 20, when they're 30, you know, when they're 40. Not just when did they learn to read, and when did they learn to take a shower by themselves, and, how do you prepare your teenage daughter for the oncoming of puberty and a period. And I mean, thank God for ABA, because I wouldn't have known that I had to pre-teach all that stuff. So I appreciate the IRIS model, and I appreciate the opportunity to take this class and do this journal. This is Lori signing off. Thanks.